Well, we have a handful of participants online, and since it's a small group here, if you'd like, please feel free to introduce yourself. I'm Mark Cosmos, landscape architect with the city, and we're here for the third public workshop. This is Alexis Griffin, and who do we have online? Looks like the first person unmuted is JC. Would you like to say hi?
Hi. Oh, I can't make my camera show for some. I don't have my normal controls. But hi, JC Berg. I literally live across the street from the school, so sorry I can't be there. I'm just making dinner for the family. And I'm also I attended, I think, the first workshop and missed the second one, so just staying informed.
Okay.
Stacy.
Thank you. Emily and Kyle, would you like to say hi?
Hi, on our end, we're managing baby things, but we are excited to be here remotely. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. And last, Kat.
Yeah, hi. I live down the street in the park and really excited to see what happens.
All right.
Great, and we have some more visitors that we can introduce in next, but I'll do a little more of an introduction for myself. I'm Alexis Griffin. I am a landscape designer for a local firm called Cameron McCarthy Landscape Architecture and Planning. I was asked to consult on this project as a BIPOC consultant and to help the community engagement process throughout these wonderful series of
8
events,
months?
I guess. Yeah, like
8
how long
months?
have I been here? Yes, 8 months. Yes.
8 months.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, so for those of you who came in, that's our way in out emergency exit. There is a restroom at the back. And we will have plenty of time for questions at the end. What we're going to do is a quick project recap. Go through our goals that were set up for the project and then look at the plan concepts and see how those two are working together. Because we set up the goals in order to create the right plan for the park, for the neighborhood. We'll look at our public feedback. We'll walk you through that concept and then open up for questions and talk about next steps. So.
Should we introduce other people?
You know, we should actually. I recognize this family. You've been to every workshop so far, right? And at least one of your boys was asking us questions last time, I think. Yes, good job. So I'm waiting for questions from you, but if you like, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Shane O'Neill, neighbor. I live half block from the park. It's Calvin. He goes to school here. Dave Miles goes to school here. He's 11. I'm Angela.
Thanks for coming in person.
Melanie Stemple, Ward 1 City Councilor. This is Ward 1.
I'm Kelly Shadwood, the Community Engagement Manager for Parks and Open Space, and my team does a lot of the safety work around the park, the park ambassadors, and the park resource officers.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Emily Proudfoot, principal landscape architect in the Parks and Open Space Planning Office. I work with Mark. Carolyn. And I'm Carolyn Griffin, the Parks and Natural Resource Planning Manager. The Smith Ramsey, landscape designer and public works engineering. Kind of taking the next phase of the project. Marina Lynch and landscape public works, and I'll be helping Lindsay.
All right. I think we have everybody. And by the way, Emily Proudfoot is on our Zoom call. So if there are chats or questions, she'll be taking a look at those and getting back to you and interrupting me if need be to go to the next stop. Let's go next. My slide is not advancing. There we go. Okay. So this is our third of 3 workshops. We usually do 2 to 3 in-person workshops, but 3 surveys. And what we do is,
Keep going.
okay, what we do is, and what we did, I think, was talk to everybody first. To set up our goals, to understand what's going wrong in the park, what's not working. And we did hear a lot from everybody over and over about safety. That's was and still is a top concern, and that's great. I think we're going to be doing some things to address that. We got together then a second time, applied all that to 3 concepts. And all those 3 concepts were buildable concepts, and they have trade-offs. But from that, we got to hear what you really liked and what really rose to the top out of those. And so now at this one, survey workshop 3, we're going to take a look at how that hybrid design comes to fruition. So while this is the end of the public process, sorry, I'm remembering the slides in a different order. Part of what we do is take your input as a community. We add the input from our maintenance and operational staff because they help us understand what's maintainable, make sure we're picking equipment, play equipment, for example, that's easily replaceable, that's sturdy, durable. And then we take all that with the project budget too, make sure we're on budget and that we're presenting something that then our partners in engineering, Lindsay and Marina, who you met, will be then taking this to the next level. Now, while this is the end of our public process, we're actually just kicking into the entire design process. So what you're seeing is a colorful image of the park, of where things go, of what's included. And then what's going to happen from here is design and development of construction drawings or blueprints, if you will, that we can then give to a contractor. Contractor will give us great prices and we can have the project constructed in 2024. Or we're also saying maybe 2025. And the reason for that is simply because we've learned through the last 3 or 4 projects over the last number of years that there have been a lot of lead time issues that have delayed installed projects. So while we're still striving for that 24, we don't want anybody to be surprised if it does slip into the next year.
So before we actually build anything, we like to create goals to help guide us through this design innovation project, or process rather. Some of you might know already our 3 goals that we've outlined. These are really created through our conversations with neighbors, as well as our conversations with our advisory board, which is made up of Black members of the Eugene and Springfield area. So these 3 goals are to create a park that is safe and well maintained, to promote intergenerational neighborhood fun, and to celebrate and honor MLK Jr.'s life and legacy. All right, so we've all been, oh.
Come on in, don't be shy, it's okay.
I pace around. Yeah, for sure.
That's okay too.
Well, serious. So some of you have been to these other workshops that we've held. This is the 3rd of 3. And really the first thing that we noted coming from the neighbors was that safety was the primary concern surrounding this park. We also noted that this park doesn't need a complete overhaul or redesign. It just needs some modifications to help improve the space and promote safety and the feeling of being safe. Some of these other modifications include lighting, parking, improving the playground, improving visibility so that people feel comfortable being in this park. So what we've heard and what we've done is actually, as a part of the advisory board, create an event called Honoring Black Legacy, where we brought in Black citizens from the Eugene Springfield area to figure out how we can better honor these parks, which are named after Black people. So MLK Jr., of course. The primary concerns that came out of the advisory group and our Honoring Black Legacy event were also what the neighbors thought. There's a lot of safety concerns. But another sort of major concern was, is this park respecting the park's namesake, MLK Jr.? And how can we better maintain and care for this park, who is named after a man with MLK Jr.'s stature? Some of the park amenities that we heard coming from these different events and talking with the advisory group were increasing the gathering spaces, making the playground maybe more functional, maybe a little bit cooler, and having art and interpretation of MLK Jr. So another potential for this process and this project specifically is the potential for actually renaming this park. Now, there are some community members who feel that the park size and sort of outdated features don't really reflect or match the stature of MLK Jr.'s name. And there's potential for renaming of this park. However, there's sort of mixed feelings when it comes to the idea of renaming for various reasons. So the city is going to be taking on sort of parallel conversations within the community to make sure that this direction going forward is the right direction. So stay tuned for that conversation.
And if I could just add to that, no, you covered it. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the renaming process came up in the early workshops. And the park needs a renovation regardless. And so that's the only reason we're separating that process, because we recognize that that process is probably going to take a little bit longer. So that'll continue as we're developing the construction drawings for the park. So what we heard in the second survey was pretty consistent. Safety was at the top. But there was support for parking restrictions. In fact, we tried that. We tried a no parking all the way around the park. There was a sunset on that. And there was some positive that came out of that test. We had a lot of support for option C. That's the one that's up here on the board. And the things that concept had for us included the upgrades to safety. They all did in some degree. Need for trees and shade. This is the only one that is trying to save all of the trees on the park. There are a handful that are in difficult places, but we're going to try and work around them as best we can. This design also had support for a skate feature, and all three concepts had support for increased lighting, more amenities, more seating, all-inclusive play features, and that sort of thing. So this option C, or concept C rather, was the highlight. And what we've done is we've taken most of those elements out of concept C, and then some others that we heard and received feedback on in the survey. One of the items in there, and I'm going to go ahead and move the mouse so that those online can see this. One of the issues with option C was that open lawn kind of disappeared with it. And so what we've done is really changed and flattened the grades in the site and in the park so that we can keep a mostly flat open lawn on this edge. So that's an improvement that hybridized some of those ideas. The playground itself is, think of it as a mesa or a plateau. So we took what was a very tall, single pointed hill that was about here in the middle of the park, and we're going to flatten that and spread all that out. So the playground will be elevated a little bit. That actually makes it a bit more visible. So the berm is going away, but we do gain back that open lawn space. As part of the design, we're actually doing very little on this diagonal entry, which is the former main entry to the park. That loop goes all the way around the backside and then connects to the new playground. So most of our improvements are really concentrated on this corner and edge of the park. The exception, of course, is the trees. So the green trees are all the existing ones that are in the park right now, shown as existing to remain, and all the yellow ones are proposed new. So north is to the right on all of these drawings, and in this case, we're putting new trees, new shade trees to the south of the playground so that the playground gets the shade that it needs. As we look at this from Grant Street, we do have the existing fort is there to remain. We've added a dedicated ADA parking spot on the street, a couple of planting beds to really celebrate that entry and add to the celebration of Martin Luther King Jr., as well as some interpretive pillars throughout the site. And we'll be doing 3 to 5 of those. Over here behind the trees, this is actually an existing pretty good shady spot on the site. We have a little plaza and group area with some tables and chairs. Oops. So in plan, let's look at this and talk about a couple more things. Here's that parking that I mentioned. So this is a dedicated handicap parking spot, van accessible. What that means is that this space is, for the most part, going to be open a lot of the time. Now let's talk about that parking. So on all three sides, we did a no parking restriction. And unfortunately, due to the public right-of-way rules, we can't do that as a permanent no parking, but we can do a 2-hour parking restriction with a tow away. Say that again, with a tow away. So that means that at that 2-hour mark, action can be taken immediately. So we think that's going to also allow, if others need to drive to the park for some reason, bad day or a distance, or you're meeting somebody who lives in the neighborhood, then there is still parking for you on the site. And that's an appropriate amount of time for a park of this size. I'll point out a couple more things here too, just waking my mouse up. As you come in on this new entry, you'll see off to the right here, this is that group area where we have some tables and chairs set up. The edge of the playground has this curb that starts really low, just about as high as your foot is, and then gets a little bit taller as you come down over here. And that's our skate-friendly curb wall. So we talked about big skate stuff, little skate stuff. This is just a little thing. So this is not going to draw people from WJ to come out here, but it's a great little learning piece for kids to be able to try and get their feet wet. On this edge here, since we lost the berm, and remember I mentioned that this playground is a plateau, this is a long bench seat on the edge of that playground, and that bench seat faces the courts, so that if there's a group there for playing a game, there is somewhere there for them to sit. It's also a natural separator to the playground. You can actually, it's wide enough that you can sit on it and sit cross-legged and face one another. So it's got a good interactive element. And then on either side of that, we have a couple of interpretive pillars. The playground itself, just as with the earlier concepts, did increase in size about 120%. And we'll have the additional features that we were looking for: more swings, more bigger swings. And then as far as the elements themselves, we're still working on picking the actual equipment. This is getting close to what it's going to look like, but there are a lot of climbing things in there. And the reason for that is it has a very transparent nature. And so we don't have to worry about people hiding or sleeping under decks or under platforms or under the stairs that go up to something. Let me, what's that? Playground surfacing. That's right. We didn't even talk about that. So the playground surfacing we're planning is poured in place, which is the rubber surfacing. So what you see at River Play, it's a solid rubber surface. So no longer any mulch in which garbage and dog stuff and needles and that kind of thing can fall. So it's a much safer environment, and it's, you know, it's got that attenuating surface, which is a really good thing. Thank you, Carolyn. Just turning off all the detail for a minute. I mentioned those 4 tables and chairs. So each one of these symbols is a 4-sided table, and it has a bench seat with it. These bench seats are rather large. Easily 2 kids can sit on one side, and they're designed for 1 adult, or 1 plus adult. They're 4-sided. They have a little game piece in the middle. So if you want to bring your chess or checkers, you can play. And then one of them will be ADA accessible. We've taken the drinking fountain that used to be over here close to the street edge, and we moved it in. So now it's right between the playground and where most likely the parents are going to sit and watch. So it's in a really good spot. You'll see these purple squares here. Those are the interpretive pillars, where we'll do some kind of interpretation of Martin Luther King or other as we develop that process. And that's going to be a parallel process we'll talk about. These 3 yellow circles, those are our new lights. We currently have 1 light in the park, and we think 2 to 3 is about the right number. And this is a placeholder because the one thing to understand is we take this, when we take it to the next level, and the designers who do all the hard work are sitting at the back of the room right now, will actually do the calculations and have the right people on staff to look at that and say, okay, this light is covering enough area. It has a cutoff so that the neighbors to the west are not, you know, aren't getting all the glare and all that kind of thing. So they might move around a little bit. 2 may be a good number, but that's all to be worked out. So we are going to make sure that the park is safely lit. By the way, there are actually 2 existing streetlights down here on the corner. And that's one of the reasons why we tried to keep them away from that west edge of the park, because we already have some light spillover from there that's helping us. Here are two benches in the park that can overlook the playground and this open lawn space right here. Bike racks right between the courts and the play area, and close enough to the active areas, far enough from the edge that we don't have to worry about them walking away as soon as you turn around. So as of today, we have 34, maybe 35 surveys completed. I did the check in the morning, and I think somebody noted there was another entry. So if you've taken it, thank you. If you haven't, please do. So for those online as well. And please tell your friends and your neighbors to take it. We want to know that we got this right. And we want to know that we're not missing something. We want to know that that this is well received, and we want everybody to be informed too. So part of that is when you go to the survey, you also have the option to sign up for information. So I mentioned that we were just ending the public process. This is now the rest of the design process starts at this point. Our next steps are for that design development, doing the construction drawings. Oh, right, I'm supposed to be pointing so the people online can see what we're doing. So we're right about here in our timeline. And so going forward, we'll develop the drawings, we'll take them out to bid. We'll do the construction in 24, 25, 2024, 2025. And hopefully with completion, goal is 2024, thank you, Alexis. But if it runs a little long, that's okay. During this time right here, right in the middle, maybe where the green arrow is, Alexis mentioned the park renaming process that's happening. So that's gonna happen as this park is developed. So if that name change happens, you could see it on the new sign. But there's nothing that means that once the park is completely built, that the sign can't be updated.
There's another parallel process,
There is another parallel process. What was it?
the art process.
The art process, that's right. I honestly blanked out.
Okay.
So the art process, we said we would provide interpretation of Dr. Martin Luther King, since he's the park's namesake. Understanding that if that park name changes, maybe it's a different interpretation. And what we did is we decided that interpretation was going to be some vertical thing. We're calling them pillars. Are they concrete, steel, metal? Who's the artist? What's the artist's idea for bringing out the story of this Black leader of our community? All of that happens now too during this latter part of the timeline. So with that said, I think for a minute, I think we'll just turn the cameras on so that I see all those here. Stop share, right? 3 people need elevating. Thank you. Elevating or unmuting? Gotcha. Oh, cool. Okay, it looks like JC has a question. So JC, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Okay, I'd love to turn on my camera if I could, but it's not giving me the option. My question is for the sidewalk that goes around the open space of the park, will that be wide enough for two-way traffic? Say if somebody's, taking a walk or a jog in one direction and riding a skateboard or a bike in the other direction, would there be room for two-way traffic?
So that, good question. That is the existing sidewalk that's out there. It is just shy of 4.5 feet wide. So the answer is no. This is a pretty small park. This is a neighborhood park that's between 2 blocks. And so in a larger, maybe community level park that has, we're at about what, 3/4 of an acre for this park. We'll start looking at those wide paths for circulation and for people doing a circuit, but this is a pretty small park. I will say, however, when Alexis is pulling up a drawing here, so maybe for those who are online, I'll bring up this PowerPoint again here. Just bear with me. And oops. Go to this plan view here. So this is JC was asking, I think, about this path right here, right? So that's existing.
Yes.
So right about here where my mouse is moving, from there up, we're actually going to ramp up to get to this plateau where the playground is. That will get wider. That'll get to our standard minimum 5 feet. This is a really old park, so we didn't have our standards all set up. This portion right here is going to be much wider. Right now, we're planning on 8 feet. That might go down to a minimum standard. One of the reasons for that is in our larger parks, where our trash receptacles and other items are located deep in the park, we allow for our maintenance staff to pull up and do things like service the trash cans, service other parts of the park. With a park this small, you don't typically see that, but given the activity that happens here, and since each park is visited once a day, we said, well, there's a nice thing about a city vehicle pulling in and parking right in the middle of the park and taking that sort of ownership of it, right, by physically being in there. So what we said is we're going to try to keep this path right here from 9th Street all the way down to here at that 8-foot minimum so that they can drive their truck vehicle. So mind you, they don't need to. This is a small park. They can just walk from the edge to there. But if we can keep that in our budget, and concrete is one of those things that tends to really jump up and affect the project's budget, we think that's going to do a lot for the park as far as one of those activating pieces. Does that answer your questions, Jason?
Yeah, just to, if you point out, you said if the part that will ramp up, the sidewalk in question that will ramp up towards the playground. My daughter is 10 years old and she's barely learning her skateboard, and like you said, with the skate feature there, it's perfect for beginners. I could totally see her going down the ramp and around the loop and then coming over and attempting to try the wall, but chickening out, and then going around and going down, just doing loops, trying to get up the courage to get on that wall.
Gotcha. That's why you asked the question. All right. Well, that context is
Great question.
helpful. And then I'll say too, the steepness of that is it'll be perceptible, but it's on the order of 2.5% to 3% right now. So that's
that's what she does with the Chavez playground right now, which if you go, it's barely any grade at all, and she just practices standing on the board and going down.
cool.
That's awesome.
Okay. Well, let's see. Do we have any other questions maybe in the room?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question about the current play structure. Do we get to have any sort of voice on what structure will, like, how does that decide, like, what will replace it? Because, the current one, while there are problems in it, it's still, we've heard it's a house in the park so that our children that are tiny to play on the slides and stuff like that, just like what the new structure, if there is a structure, if there's climbing features, because it's such a small, it's physically a small park, and it also kind of, designed for small children at first. That's kind of the feeling I get from Chavez, not really there's a lot of larger parks in play structure and what that looks like.
Sure. That's a good question, and it's going to be a hard one for me to answer because we're working through something that we got feedback from our internal staff on that was specifically aimed at younger children like yours that are here in the room. So play equipment has sort of this cutoff, 2 to 5, 5 to 12. The 2 to 5 is that the really low slides. You'll see a lot of the stairs because that's easier for those kids to get up onto that slide and equipment. But that also becomes the hiding issue and illicit behavior issue that we have in this park. So our first design round with the playground consultant, we gave them this direction of we want everything to be as see-through as possible with minimum number of those ramps. What we got back was totally that. It was a lot of climbing. However, that climbing element, if that's the only way to get up to the slide, is a little difficult for the little ones. So we haven't worked that out yet. We're still working on that piece. There will be swings both for the smaller kids with the bucket seats, as well as for the older kids. So right now it's only 2 swings out there. And so we're trying to do 3, 4 in that site.
Is there going to be any more sort of discussion on the playground, like 2 to 5 versus?
Not really, not in this part of the process.
I just, if a structure is going away, I'm just interested in what structure is going to replace it, because like for me, yes, I enjoy that they have a way to get just down and up the slides, and that they're not just giant scary slides, but that's, I mean, obviously, children grow up, it needs change and all that sort of thing. But just down the street, literally 2 houses down to kind of baby too, so that there are nothing that, you know, it's kind of hard to even get to, or to remember to do when you're young kids.
Seems like some of that climbers and things. I mean, we're gonna have things for young kids.
Yeah, there are things for young kids. I was just pointing out that we don't have that design finalized. What we're showing in the drawings right now is a placeholder. But it's got the right flavor of what that's going to be. So that's the kind of feedback that we're looking for as far as how many young children there are, how many older children there are. One of the things we heard early on, I think from our family over here was, actually, no, it was the gentleman who lives just to the west. Said he used to have really, really big monster slide. That's a great wish, but this is a really, really small playground. So we're somewhere between the small kid slide and a medium length slide. So I think we're going to be able to accommodate the number of kids. That's what I think.
Thanks for your
Al has a
question.
question.
Al has a question. All righty.
I muted them, so they might have to unmute.
Oh,
Might like to ask about it.
yeah.
I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you for the opportunity here to give a question and make a couple of comments. My first comment overall is seems to have been quite a nice process, and it looks, generally like a pretty good plan. Mike, and just also to begin, I want to acknowledge J.C. Berg's comment about the skateboarding. I'm a little bit, I'm kind of questioning it to some extent. It is because it's a small park, and maybe we're trying to be everything to everyone. And J.C. said it herself. Her 10-year-old daughter would maybe do a loop, and maybe maybe older folks might not appreciate that on the loop section up there. So I'm just kind of questioning. This is not a question, but this is kind of questioning the skate-friendly curb wall. But that said, I could live with it if it is as is. But my question is about the basketball court. This really is a very objective question. How often is that basketball court really used? Is it really used to play basketball? Do you know?
It is. Yes, in fact.
It is. Oh, okay.
We've
Okay.
had,
So,
yeah.
so here's another comment. It does rain in the Pacific Northwest, and if we want to make the basketball court kind of rain friendly, have you considered covering it, putting kind of a roof on it, so that when it's raining, people could still play basketball and not get soaking wet? Also, having lived in the Far West neighborhood for a number of years, I know the neighborhood was looking for a place to do a little event. And so, if it was covered, and if it was a special event and they got permission to use the basketball court for it, if it was covered, then they could have the event under the basketball court. Do you see what I'm saying? So it could serve two functions. Instead of just basketball court, it could also be a larger group gathering area that was covered in case of rain. Just in terms of process, I would suggest this, and this is under the very popular term called inclusion. Okay. I would like to see a kids focus group, like maybe get 6 to 8 kids of the appropriate ages, maybe somewhere between the ages, of 5 and 10, and have them sit down with the parks people and explain this to them, show it to them, and ask them what they think. Just ask them what their thoughts are. I think it might be very insightful. It always is for me, having been an elementary teacher and a preschool teacher, what kids will say when you ask them questions. And the final thing is this. Part of my background is in actually developing trails. So I like the loop concepts here. But the other thing I'm involved in terms of my background is interpretation. And so one thing that can be a sticking point if you're going to hire an artist or someone to develop interpretive signage, and this is along the idea of inclusion again. It's and just to give you an example, like telling a story of an indigenous tribe to the area, right? I wouldn't dare want to tell the story of indigenous tribe. Okay, I'm an old white guy. Okay, so my point is invite the appropriate group to help with the design. In other words, let them tell their story in their own way. That's how I've often said it about Native American tribes, is when you're doing interpretation, let them tell the story in their own words, in their own way. So I'm just kind of inviting that as a process for the interpretive signage. So that's it. Thanks for the time. And if you have anything you want to say, go ahead.
Okay, I will. I'm going to work backwards and rely on Carolyn for some notes. I'll start with the art and interpretive. I have to say, Alexis was smiling when she heard you over here, because you said what is really at the heart of what we do in the city, which is think about those kinds of things. In fact, our art program will take all of that into account, and we don't do that here within Parks Planning. We're planting the seed to say we'd like to do some interpretation, and the what and the who and the how is a whole process that involves outreach to the community, picking the right people, the right message, and then working with that artist. So thank you for that. So that will be part of our city process.
Representation from our Black advisory groups.
Right, with representation from our Black advisory group, which we had as part of not just this park renovation, but also the development of Manny Reynolds and some improvements at Alton Baker. So let's see, to go back one, which was the shade over the courts. Great idea. However, I know, well, there's a however. So a neighborhood park has some basic amenities, playground, usually some kind of active court sport or a half a court at least, seating, trees for shade, open lawn. It's developed to the level that it serves people within a walking distance. When we start getting into a community level park, which is both physically bigger, has a larger impact on the neighborhood, it asks people actually visiting it, then we start talking about things like a covered shelter or a restroom or some of those extra things. And then when we get to the next level of park, a regional park, then, again, another level of that. This is a pretty small park with a modest budget, and something like a shelter, which given the safety issues that came up very early in the park, even questioning stairs that some of the homeless community would come in and sleep underneath. That just, to me, that just brings back some of the memory of the comments from the early surveys where folks asked to reduce and not do some of that. So there are things like that that are hard to really talk about and hard to come to grips with, because yes, this is a very rainy part of the country, and it would be great if that could be used more. But on the event portion of that, you mentioned that it'd be great to set up an event. There's nothing that would stop an event group that wanted to do something out there to set up that temporary cover and shelter. It would not be permanent. It would not be for the basketball. It would be for the event. In fact, we worked with our recreation personnel and said, how can we activate this park? What kind of things do you think you could do here? They talked about how they could bring in I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the program, Carolyn.
I don't know if I'm gonna do that.
Fun for All, the Fun for All program. Just kind of talking through this and saying, well, how could a small park like this accommodate that? They talked about movies in the park and talked about 200 people coming. You couldn't fit 200 people within this entire city block, maybe a tenth of them within the park. So, but understanding that we want to do some of that, we've got great spaces for it. The court is a great space, the group gathering area is a great space, and it can still be set up, but not in a permanent way. And actually for that event, there's something that I forgot to mention. We're actually widening this little piece of paving over here on the edge of the lawn, because in hearing from our recreation folks, they said that one of the hardest things about an event is you don't have a restroom here. But now we have a place where we can bring in a portable restroom for that event. Set it up, it's right off the curb, and then it goes away after that.
So, Al LePage here. I want to acknowledge what you said, and I'm a trail planner, not a park planner. So thank you for educating me. It sounds like a lot of great thoughts gone into this. I got to admit, I did think about covering that spot in terms of maybe inviting the potential for homeless camping. And so I could see how that could potentially be an issue. And just to kind of, my final comment on this is one thing I had forgotten to mention. I'm looking at the wood fence in the back, okay? And as a backpacker myself, who's had to stealth camp sometimes, which means camping in places I'm not supposed to camp, right? Not in the city, but, you know, other places. What it boils down to is I'm thinking, is there some way to mitigate the potential for camping along the wooden fence? And what I'm thinking is if there were, say, native plants put in there, kind of a linear biodiversity garden, so to speak, that would, I think, discourage people from pitching a tent next to the wall. And I would also just suggest that maybe at the corners, at all four corners, you'd have kind of a little bit of a biodiversity garden setting, so that we've got more than just green lawn and trees. It's great to have the trees, but I think introducing that in for just the nature that it gives you, the higher complexity, might also be beneficial in terms of the quality of the experience in the park. So any ideas on that?
Yes, and I still have a list to go back to from your earlier questions. So I'm going to do a couple. So three. Yeah, we do want to hear from other people. I want to address the leading or the use of the fence. Actually, our Kelly Shadwick, I think I'm going to ask to speak to that. But before she does, I want to say that right now we do have plants along that fence edge, and the issue is people are using the cover of that shrubbery and those plantings in order to defecate on the park, and we're pulling all of that out so that it's completely visible and putting a mow strip along that edge so that there's nowhere for that kind of activity to happen. And if you want, I'd be more than happy to speak with you after or tomorrow, because it sounds like you're very energized and excited about this, and maybe you missed one of those earlier meetings. So I don't want to completely shut you down. Do contact me, but I'm going to ask Kelly to talk about some of the enforcement that we have coming up, hopefully this next year. You can, or as long as you speak loud enough for this guy, we're good.
Well, awesome. So again, Kelly Shadwick, and so I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of our park safety program. So we have 2 full-time park ambassadors and some seasonal park ambassadors, and their role is really to be out in our parks like MLK and reminding people of park rules and not drinking and drugs and erecting tents, etc. So for MLK, they go twice a day because it is one of our hot spots. We have MLK, Scober, and some others, mostly in the urban shore, that really are those hot spots. We also have our park resource officers, 2 police officers, who help us when we need it. Mostly we get voluntary compliance. About 90% of the time we get voluntary compliance for issues around illicit activity. So when the park safety team looks at a plan like this, you know, they really are looking for some of those hiding spots, like under a slide, et cetera, because that in this particular park, that's where we tend to have a lot of the problems, or when it's like you can hide in things and use drugs during the day. You guys know this. So that is kind of an overview. You know, we did have a lot of car camping, but that's gotten a lot better. And we do have these new 2-hour parking signs going in the next couple of weeks, with that being done by parking. And so I think that's going to be really helpful going forward. And our park ambassadors are funded by the levy, and we are hopeful that in the future we're going to get a couple more. So we'll have 4 park ambassadors full-time year-round, which will be really helpful. Any
Thank
other
you, Kelly.
questions?
That was really good.
Okay.
Thank you. Did I see a hand over here? You did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when I saw the concept, I was like so pleased. It was great to see it from the beginning, the kind of different ideas floating around, the 3 concepts, and then this was different from what you had prepared before. It does feel like a hybrid where I think it's a really neat balance of some of the objectives that I heard. I'm particularly excited about, like the seat wall, and that it's something built that kind of creates a place in the center where things were just kind of, I don't know, we weren't really connected, different areas, and there was always kind of a weird in-between space. So I like that. I'm really excited about that. And the game tables, another nice feature that I'm very excited about. So I wanted to give kind of like positive feedback. I really like the direction that this is going in, and I don't know that I have any other specific feedback on the park design itself, but I want to take the opportunity while we have other city staff here from other departments as well to ask about the other opportunity to engage other departments in other issues that the neighborhood is dealing with. Like it's kind of, I know there's like a Move Eugene program that's getting underway. And we live, my kids go to school here. We experience the kind of like hard stop of really pedestrian friendly environments that this neighborhood is an island that even though we're so close to everything, it is really not pedestrian friendly. And even just looking at the area around the park, it looks like it should be a really quiet area. And if, 80% of the time it is, that other 20%, it's super wide right of ways from 11 all the way to 8. And it's not really safe, and it's not consistent with the rest of the neighborhood feeling right along this edge. So I would be really encouraged to see maybe not funded through any of the parks, because I understand that this is other infrastructure, some attention to the rest of the right of way, seeing that it is not an improved right of way up to the rest of city standards with parking strips, or there's a sidewalk. It's great. But that's our sort of part of my other wish list for the neighborhood, that it just becomes, well, we get a nice place at the center of the neighborhood, and then also improving the ability of the rest of the neighbors to get there and use it and feel safe on the way to it.
We have a question online about speeding, and I don't know if we've heard that comment in the past through this process, but is that, are speeding cars part of what you're talking about?
Chambers along.
Oh, it's 10. Yeah, that's what this person said as well.
Oh, yeah, it definitely happens.
Yeah.
There's no stop signs from 11 to 8.
Right.
That's the other one we get, and a lot of people just don't respect stop signs.
Right.
Go figure. But it's always tough when you're walking and you're right up against it. So it's been nice not having cars parked there up at RVs and stuff parked up against the park, but then the other side of it is you kind of lose something of a barrier and separate.
Right, and a congestion buffer,
Yeah.
or that congestion makes you drive slow.
It's so
Yeah.
wide,
Yeah.
it's a really wide right away at
Yeah,
times when there
I
aren't
agree.
cars parked there. So it feels like a bit of trying to solve a problem, but then creating another one.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Is there a suggestion that you should try to narrow down right away or develop it?
I think one of the strategies that I've seen occurring throughout different parts of Eugene are the bump outs at the intersections, and that's great for in my opinion, just making it seem like you have to go slower. People are going to be reckless sometimes, but most people will seem to respond to that. And then shortening the crossing distance is super as well.
There's also opportunities, I know, talking about a non-city person, where you raise the cars up to the pedestrian level, the pedestrians are now above, right? Probably downtown. Different ways, just
Pointed out something that actually hadn't come up in the other meetings, which was the lack of the stop sign in one direction along Grant Street and in the other direction along 10th Street. And that actually feels kind of odd for being right next to a neighborhood park. Is
It's
that,
also the 4J bus stop for the neighborhood.
oh,
Mhm.
wow.
There's two other families, beside ones that get picked up and dropped off there.
And is there a sign that says bus?
It's
So
really
at the time of
funny.
the last meeting, it was kind of peak for us with school being back in session and it was still warm and there was still a lot of confusion around how to use the park. And I'm really excited to hear about the park ambassadors.
Yeah.
Yeah, Margaret, we've worked closely with, and I mean, not just me, but, you know, other neighbors have been kind of like fill-in park ambassadors, like walking around, talking with people, be like, hey, just to remind you, there's no smoking or drug use or drinking of any kind at the park. Thanks for keeping it a nice place for everybody to enjoy. And I have not had bad experiences walking up to people who use the park. But I haven't had 90% compliance because I'm just a person, I don't know. So it'd be nice to have more of a presence. I like the idea of the servicing to be able to go in and kind of, you know, like when you go downtown, you have people watering the flowers, they're on the sidewalk, like that's just nice to see it being taken care of. And the people who take care of the park have been very nice to work with and very appreciative of too. So.
How about online, Emily? Do we have anybody who wants to ask a question?
Question about, and I did answer it, but one person noticed that we did actually end up not showing the bump outs in the street. And I answered that we removed it for budget reasons. Just because costs are rising so much, but it's we're really trying to do the best that we can within the park itself. But I did encourage the person to talk about a survey to report to them. So, you know, please think so if that's something you're kind of missing. I think, you know,
And that is something that we would want to hear or we would want to talk about with our transportation planners, because they're really the ones who design those bump outs. I mean, we did. And we said, if we can absorb this into the cost of the project, then Parks and Open Space will pay for those bump outs. But typically that's done through the improvement of the street. And so if that street needs and actually gets an assessment and they do some kind of, survey or what I'm losing my words, where they check for the speeds and they check the traffic and the traffic counts and say, oh yeah, this intersection could use some love. Then those are the kinds of things they look at and consider. I don't know personally which ones would be on the table or not. I just know that we tried to do it and we just.
So then will we be talking to transportation about this? Will we be raising, how is that?
Another question here actually,
With the city?
that asks about a crosswalk at the intersection of 10th and Grant. Does that make sense or be possible? And I'm assuming that, the person purchased was JC, that she meant like painted on the ground. And I think because it's around the park, I think it probably is more just public presentation and sharing the concerns of the neighbors around the park. And just seeing what their thoughts are for creating a calmer situation.
Would that be able to extend beyond the park to like Chambers and 11,
Right.
and Garfield and what is that?
It's basically.
A little bit, yeah.
You know, 7 to 11 is.
So there is a program where, neighbors can get up, borrow the speed guns and see how fast people are going and collect that data and then give it back to transportation planning. And if it meets a certain set of minimums, then they can consider traffic calming. So it's worth calling transportation planning, just because, well, A, it's kind of a fun, and it's really hard to meet those minimums, so it can also be frustrating, but it's good for them to have awareness.
Yeah, I'm just curious about joining, like, there was somebody speaking from Jefferson West Side, maybe. So we are very cut off. So like when I go for a personal walk or with our kids and stuff, like going from, either 11 to Chambers at the crosswalk, if you hit the button, it doesn't give you the walk until the whole thing turns over. And that's still like along with school, Chambers and 11. And then if you're wanting to connect from where this park is and downtown or Monroe Park, if you're walking, not along the main driveways, it is very difficult. And there's like car preference, not just like how fast people are going, but if you look at how somebody can be a pedestrian or bike crossing Chambers between 8th and 11th, depending on the time of day, like it's very, very scary and challenging. And then also, like if you take Broadway to Monroe Park, you know, there's that car turn, like you can take a bike, you just have to jog as a pedestrian. Yeah, it's just silly, and it'd be a good opportunity to bring other neighborhoods in on foot and pedal.
Yeah, really.
Thank you.
Right?
Actually, it's really difficult to walk around the neighborhood. Yeah.
Even though it's like really easy to, but really.
Yeah, because like the sidewalks don't continue, and so like finally you feel like you're on a nice peaceful street, and then all of a sudden there's no sidewalks, you have to go into the street, and if the only when that like the only time there are complete sidewalks is if you're next to the busiest roads.
Yeah.
So it's like not really that pleasant to walk next to really heavy traffic, but it's impossible that you're not walking the street and you can have a nice walk. Yeah, it's a big difference from the Whitaker. Like you can just walk around with the Whitaker, and you can walk from park to park even without the big, you know, thoroughways. But it's, yeah, it's really hard to walk.
Yes, Counselor Song.
Sorry to bring this up, but is this being paid for from the bond measure, so that the money's already set aside?
Yes.
And will be affected by all the budget cuts coming, or the levy that's going to be on the ballot will be paying for the people to come get the garbage and ambassadors and the things that would help make it lively and so. Both of the revenues.
So I'll just, for those online or who might not be able to hear, Counselor pointed out that the money for this park is coming from the last bond. And so that money is set aside. So there are, in fact, I did see a question in our survey about, you know, what about this, you know, the future of the whole city? Well, that money is already aside, and we can't mix those pots of money. So it's not like this park is taking away from other things that the city could be doing. It's earmarked, and it has to be for that because that's what people voted for. And then I don't think I'm allowed to repeat what the counselor said about.
Yeah,
But well, and she's right that the levy funds the maintenance of a park. So and the safety team for the park. So levy funds those kinds of things.
and there will be a levy on the new ballot, so I believe. City staff. It's gonna be really important. We're facing big budget cuts, and without this levy, we're gonna have a hard time paying for the maintenance of the park. Just to put another plug in. But I'm excited about this park. I came to this event. These informational meetings and discussions, and I loved it. I thought it was such a great meeting. It was small, but people really contributed different ideas, and we really talked about the things. So it's exciting to see the curiosity that there was more about the part, but I sometimes, and it's like you say, you have a wonderful neighborhood, but it's got busy roads. And I think this part is really good. So I'm very happy that the bond is being.
Us too. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
Kudos for our work. We're excited about the project. And, you know, and the safety actions that we took on really around limiting parking in front of the park, it really helped bring some. So it sounds like we're kind of happy about what's happening, and elevating some of these transportation concerns is, you know, similar to other folks here. So that's great. And be sure to, you know, if you haven't taken the survey already, please include these things. It's important for us to do.
And there's not a lot of you here, so get your neighbors, get everybody to fill in that survey. It makes a difference when there's a lot of people responding. You still care and listen and count, and it's smaller, but you get bigger numbers. You have a bigger voice.
I have one thing to add.
Sure.
I just wanted to add that another thing that's going to be helpful is the parking program has created neighborhood service officers. And they are really the ones now addressing the kind of parking issues that you might find at MLK. So if someone is trying to park all day and past the 2 hours, they only have 4 neighborhood service officers right now, but they're planning on having 8. And it's going to make a big difference as far as having another kind of enforcement arm to address people staying in those parking spots longer. So we're looking forward to them coming on board.
When we draft up our minutes for this workshop, I think the discussion about the bigger around the neighborhood will definitely be in there. And maybe as part of that, we can include 1 or 2 contacts. Do you think we could do that within transportation or traffic to say if this group wants to take this to another level? What do you think, Carolyn? So we'll put all this in the minutes because it's part of the workshop. But as park planners, it's hard for us to talk about all the street stuff. Do we do a bump out? Do we do this, that? And I don't know who to call out right now from transportation to say, call this fellow on this extension right now. But we could put that in the minutes.
We
So
can
yeah.
also share this information, what we heard with our colleagues. Yes.
Yeah.
So, which will happen.
We will do that. We will share that, but we also want you to call.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the issue I think you mentioned before, and council, I'm sure that you're aware as well, we don't have a functioning neighborhood association currently. So there isn't really a good way for any communication to happen back and forth between the city or the neighborhood. And even like the little neighborhood pocket around this park is a little toe of the neighborhood. So even within that, it's a minor subsection, completely different from the rest of the area. So even there, I have my own kind of awareness that my concerns might be limited to my immediate neighbors and not quite elevated at the neighborhood association level once and if it is.
You know, if we have one.
We're almost there.
It'd be really great.
You know, there is a transportation bond that passed, and part of the funding in that bond includes money for pedestrian improvements that haven't been identified yet. And so the transportation team is going to be doing this big public outreach, and I can't remember what it's called. It's like, maybe it's huge move. It's huge move. Yeah.
But it's kind of a mouthful.
Yeah. And they're calling it huge move. Are you huge mobility? No,
That's what sounds like. It looks good on paper, but.
Yeah.
So
So that is, and maybe we can include that in the minutes, but that's a great way. They're looking for projects. And so that, and there's funding. So.
I'll say that out loud for those online. Huge move, which the transportation bond passed, is looking for places like this around the park that need some attention, or at least to be looked at and considered.
And it's bike ped and stuff, specifically.
Yeah, it's all bike and pedestrian.
Bike ped.
Yeah.
I have one other thing to mention, and that is when it is finally renovated and open, we will have a big neighborhood party, and we'll have like a hot dog vendor and cookies. The boys on right here. Can we have a little of all those friends? Yeah, it'll be really fun, and so it's a great chance. If neighbors really come out for it, it's a great chance to meet people and recruit to the neighborhood association or whatever, and so that's a really fun time. So.
And if we need to, we'll rent the tent, right? Yes.
maybe a little bit off the subject of the park, but not the neighborhood. I would so like to have Far West Neighborhood Association get going. But never think the toe isn't important. So just because you're a small park, it's your part, you live there, you count. And I will also tell you that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if the rest of Far West isn't the same, well, they should talk about what they want. But if they're not, your voice is gonna be louder. So take care of your precious small neighborhood and to get a neighborhood association going, but you have your own coalescence of voices that can be very powerful. And it's true that we have big issues with sidewalks, and we're looking to get everybody to have a sidewalk that's walkable. And so we put that in the plan, voters approved it. You know, get down to the nitty gritty, and your voice can make a difference. So do it.
And the toes are responsible for balance, right?
Oh, you
So
know.
without that, you fall over, so. Celebrate being the toe. How are we doing here online? Pretty good?
Yeah.
Well, we want to thank everybody. Remind you to please take the survey. It's been a long process, but we think it's been beneficial, certainly beneficial to us, because we got to hear what the real issues are. Hopefully they all made it up to the top. And we look forward to opening the park with you. This is going to be exciting. This is a really exciting little park, actually. I'm excited for it. You excited? Do you skateboard? No, not yet. No. Do you want to? No.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.